Okay, let's kick off. Can I remind everyone to please keep their microphone on mute unless you're talking? So, good morning, boa noite, everyone. Welcome. Just before we kick off, I want to let you know that this session is being recorded and will be uploaded to the CONFAP website afterwards. Thank you so much for your participation here today in our fourth virtual research collaboration between Australia and CONFAP. I'm getting some feedback. If we can keep everyone's microphones on mute, that would be fantastic. Thank you. My name is Cassia Hare. I'm the Counsellor for Research and Education at the Australian Embassy in Brazil, and we've been organising these events for 2 years now with CONFAP to promote research collaboration between Australians and Brazilians. So tonight's our first night of the VRC on citizen data. We'll start with some introductory remarks, followed by an overview of the research funding arrangement between the Department of Education and CONFAP, and then our keynote speakers and the panel discussion. And we'll get straight into it. So our first speaker tonight is Miss Alison Dell, the Assistant Secretary for International Partnerships at the Australian Department of Education. Welcome, Alison.
Good morning and thank you. Good morning, everyone, and good evening. First of all, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which I'm sitting today, which is the Ngunnawal people, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. The photo that you see is not Ngunnawal land, it's Palawa land, and that's in Tasmania, where I was at Easter this year. I'm really pleased to be able to make some opening remarks on this virtual research collaboration on citizen data. As Cass said, we've done a few of these now, so we're getting quite good at them. And this is under the MOU between the department for which Cassie and I work and CONFAP. So I'm really pleased to be here. As we know, research is such a key thing for making those really critical people-to-people links and those cultural links between our countries. And so this partnership aims to promote greater collaboration and connection between Australian and Brazilian researchers. And I understand since we started at the end of... At the end of 2020, we've already had 2 funded projects, which is great. We've had more than 50 years of internationalising education, and this has demonstrated the benefits of working collectively. So we are committed to expanding our education and research partnerships with Brazil, and I'm really looking forward to helping out and doing that. Australia is recognised globally for our high quality research. We have less than 0.5% of population, but more than 4% of international scientific development. And we know that when Australians and Brazilians work together, we are more effective together than on our own. Australians' average field-weighted citation impact is 1.61. And Brazil's is 0.88, but the joint publications, the citation impact rises to 3.8, which is 4 times above the world average. And in the last 5 years, there's been more than 8,000 joint publications. So I know this has been such a great project under our MOU. We've done such a wide range of topics, including COVID-19, oceans and food security. And I really hope that today's and tomorrow's sessions are productive for you all and that you make some connections and we do some really good work out of this. Thank you very much for having me. I would also like to acknowledge, before I conclude, Professor Odia Delagostin, who's the President of CONFAP, Professor Francis Separovic, the Foreign Secretary for the Australian Academy of Science, Professor Virgilio Almeida, the Regional Deputy President for the Brazilian Academy of Science, and Mr. Mark Stickles, the ED of Pawsey Supercomputing Centre. And Mark, I was admiring your very flash and very clever video earlier on. So I would like to wish everyone good luck today and good luck for the projects and the processes, and I will see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Alison. I'd now like to hand over to Professor Gilles Delagostin, President of the Brazilian National Council of State Funding Agencies, or CONFAP.
Thank you, Cassia, and good evening to the Brazilian participants, and good morning to our Australian counterparts. First and foremost, I would like to express my gratitude to the Department of Education of Australia and the team at the Australian Embassy in Brazil for their enthusiasm and hard work in organizing this edition of the Australia-Brazil Virtual Research Collaboration, our 4th edition of this virtual collaboration. I'd also like to extend my special acknowledgement to Mrs. Alison Dell, who participated in the 2nd edition focused on ocean, and Professor Francis Sparovic, whose contribution to the closing ceremony of the 1st edition centered on COVID-19 was invaluable. Additionally, a warm welcome to Professor Virgilio Almeida, a good scientist and esteemed colleague of mine in the Brazilian Academy of Science. And Mr. Marcus Stickles, whose expertise promises to inspire meaningful discussions during the upcoming sessions. I would like to express my greetings to all the Australians and Brazilian researchers who have joined us for this event and share a common interest in pursuing collaborative projects. The collaboration between our nations serves as a robust foundation for scientific advancement and the exchange of knowledge. In December 2020, CONFAP and the Department of Education signed a Memorandum of Understanding, reaffirming their commitment to strengthening research partnerships. This agreement ensured financial support for projects coordinated by Australian and Brazilian researchers, as Alison already pointed out, with confirmed backing from Australia. Flavia is going to explain, Flavia and Tiago are going to explain a little bit more about this partnership and how it works. In Brazil, we have the participation of all the Brazilian state funding agencies, highlighting the comprehensive nature of our collaboration. The Australia-Brazil Virtual Research Collaboration was established with the aim of promoting discussions between researchers from both countries on globally relevant themes and strengthening the ties of cooperation in research and innovation. Previous editions have facilitated fruitful exchanges among over 200 Australian and Brazilian senior and early career researchers. We already have projects co-funded, as Alison pointed out, as a result of these editions, serving as a testament to the tangible outcomes of such collaborative endeavor. I sincerely hope that the discussions and interactions throughout the event today and tomorrow are engaging and fruitful. May these exchanges pave the way for valuable collaborations that contribute not only to the advancement of both our countries, but also to the global research community as a whole. Thank you very much, and I hope you all have a very good event here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Gia. I would now like to welcome Professor Francis Severovic, the Foreign Secretary from the Australian Academy of Sciences. Thank you, Professor Francis.
Thank you. Good morning and good evening, colleagues in Australia and Brazil. My name is Francis Severovic, and I'm a biophysical chemist and the Foreign Secretary of the Australian Academy of Science. Although I live in Melbourne on Wurundjeri country, today I'm coming to you from beautiful Croatia, where I was born. I'm delighted to provide a welcome address at today's online event on citizen data under the Australia-Brazil Virtual Research Collaboration, or VRC program. I'd like to congratulate the organisers, the Brazilian National Council for State Funding Agencies, or CONFAP, as I've heard you say, and the Australian Government Department of Education for your sustained efforts to grow this important networking opportunity between our two countries. I also acknowledge my colleagues at the Brazilian Academy of Sciences for your support. Today's event follows the success of previous VRC events on COVID-19 research, oceans, and food security, topics that highlighted the indispensable nature of international scientific collaboration to address some of our most pressing global challenges. Modern science is built on collaborations that surpass national borders in pursuit of innovative solutions. One of the Academy's roles is to facilitate access to international research programs and identify opportunities for collaboration, linkages, and exchange. Another is to contribute expertise and leadership in regional and global science networks and organize bilateral activities to identify potential collaborative research opportunities in areas of mutual interest. For many decades now, the Academy has assisted the Australian Government to deliver some of its international activities, including the Australia-Brazil VRC program. I now turn to the topic of today's event, citizen data. All of us at an individual level have experienced the immense benefits of a rapidly advancing digital economy in our day-to-day lives, driven by technologies that are embedded in the global systems on which our society relies. And in the research context, the Academy convenes a National Committee for Data in Science, which works in part to enable Australian scientists to more effectively use the emerging data-rich research environment to conduct data-intensive research. However, despite the opportunities for increased productivity and enhanced evidence-informed research, individuals, industry, and governments alike are grappling with the challenges and risks associated with the collection, storage, and use of this data, be it in common harms such as fraud, through to threats of national security. Indeed, within the last month, the Australian Government has appointed the nation's first cyber security coordinator as part of its efforts to make Australia the most cyber secure nation on earth. Science and certainly society have become more and more complex. It is within this increasingly complex context that we recognise the need to embrace the leadership and wisdom of Indigenous peoples to inform and enhance our collective knowledge systems. But in doing so, we need to forge deeper partnerships and collaboration and honour Indigenous peoples' rights to Indigenous data sovereignty, the ethical use of data to advance Indigenous peoples' collective well-being and self-determination. Today, no single scientist can understand all, and no single country alone can address the big scientific and societal challenges of our time. We hope that this meeting will foster the creation of new international and multidisciplinary networks of excellence related to citizen data. I am certain that because of these virtual meetings, research partnerships between Australia and Brazil will continue to grow and flourish, and we look forward to building on this success through our engagement in the Science 20 meetings that Brazil will host in 2024. So thank you, and I wish you every success.
Thank you so much, Frances, for those words. We are now going to turn to our last opening address, Professor Virgilio Almeida, the Regional Deputy President of the Brazilian Academy of Science. Thank you, Professor Virgilio. You're on mute, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you, Cassia. And good morning and good evening to everyone that is participating of this online meeting. It's really a pleasure to be here, and it's for me a great pleasure and honor to address you today for this keynote speech. As we gather here, driven by our common interest for knowledge and innovation, we we will have the opportunity to discuss important questions relevant to our countries. I think that the event topic, the main topic of the event, aligns closely with the dynamic nature of our changing world, where progress and challenges are intertwined, and we need to understand that. And as a result of looking at these possibilities of collaboration with Australia, I want to present in my keynote speak the importance of this citizen science to understand some of the most critical problems in the world today, that are the impact and consequence of the digital platforms. So that's basically what I do. And again, I hope that you all enjoyed the conference, and I hope that the number and the of collaboration projects between Australia and Brazil increase in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Virgilio, and to all our institutional speakers. Before we move on to the next portion, I think everyone's cameras are already turned on, but if they're not, please do so. We're just going to take a couple of photos. So fix your hair, get everything sorted out. Great, I think that should be good. Flavia, Fernando. Excellent. Thank you so much. Now, the next part of our session, Flavia and Tiago are going to take us through the institutional arrangements that we have under our MOU and how the joint funding applications can work. So hopefully, when you all find partnerships through this process and you've got fabulous ideas, you can use this process and get some funded projects up. So over to you, Flavia and Tiago.
Thank you very much, Cassia. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, and I can see the screen.
Thank you. So I'm Tiago Cordeiro. I'm Education and Research Manager for the Department of Education at the Brazilian Embassy, at the Australian Embassy in Brasilia. Flavia is an Advisor for International Cooperation at CONFAP. So we wanted to tell you everyone about the partnership established between CONFAP and the Department of Education, and the modus operandi for applying for joint research projects under our Memorandum of Understanding. So first, I just wanted to give a little bit of background on the Australia-Brazil research ecosystem. We have in the academic and research sphere, in 2020, we had at least 110 active agreements between Australian education institutions and Brazilian government agencies and education institutions. Brazil is today the 15th among countries collaborating in research with Australia. Some of the top collaborating institutions in Australia today are Monash University, Queensland University of Technology, and in varied research areas. Here we have just a few percentages, but a lot of the joint research work that is undertaken by researchers in both countries. Majority of 23% comes from in the medicine sector, followed closely by physics and astronomy, and agricultural sector. These second and third place tend to switch over the years between themselves. But as you'll see, there's a lot of other sectors that have been collaborating, and we hope with events like this to be fostering further cooperation. I would also just quickly mention that we also have about a dozen institutional agreements at government to government level, and some of the most interesting to share. One, Flavia will go into more detail, which is the Memorandum of Understanding between CONFAP and Department of Education. But I would also highlight the 2017 Science, Technology, and Innovation Agreement, which among its objectives, some of them are to create joint research projects and facilitate the exchange of students, scientists, and researchers between the two countries. And here just a little bit on the Australian side, the research funding landscape. Tied to the Department of Education, we have research block grants that provide funding to eligible Australian higher education providers to support research and research training. These research block grants are on a calendar year basis and are awarded based on the relative performance of each higher education provider in attracting research income and supporting students to complete higher degrees by research. The Australian research funding system recognizes that decisions are best made by its research providers, researchers, and stakeholders communities. So it allows for a lot of autonomy for the higher education providers. Within research block grants, I would highlight the research training program, which supports both domestic and overseas students undertaking research doctorate and research master's degrees, and also the research support program, which supports systemic costs of research that are not supported directly through competitive or other grants, such as libraries, laboratories, consumables, computing centers, and even salaries of support and technical staff. And on the competitive research grant side, I'll highlight the two institutions and how they work. So the Australian Research Council, ARC, is a Commonwealth entity within the Australian government. It was established as an independent body as of 2001, and its grants are competitively awarded to individuals, research teams, and large-scale centers through two broad arms, the Discovery Program, which supports individuals and small teams, and the Linkage Program, which creates links between universities, industry, and other partners. And the grant guidelines, which can be found online, set out the closing dates and the rules for submitting eligible applications. And we can later on pass some of the references for those who are interested in finding more detail. And I'd also just mention the National Health and Medical Research Council, which is Australian government's primary health and medical research funding agency. With their support, Australia undertakes outstanding health and medical research, which has contributed to significant improvements in individual and population health. Flavia, pass on the word to you.
Thank you, Thiago. Hi to everyone. Now I would like to explain briefly about the Brazilian research funding. It can be in the federal level or it can be in the state level. In the federal level, we have the Ministry of Education that is the CAPES, the Coordination for Improvement of Higher Education Personnel, more responsible to scholarship for capacity building of professors. Then under the scope of the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation, there is the CNPq, the National Research Council, responsible mainly for the support research projects. The FINEP, our innovation agency, and EBRAPI, that is the Industrial Innovation Agency. Both are responsible for the innovation scheme. And at state level, we have the FAPES. Each state has one state fund agency who activities similar to the CAPES, CNPq, and FINEP. The next, please, Thiago. So CONFAP is a non-profit organization that represents all the FAPES in the federal level. It was established in 2006. Currently, all the states has one state fund agency, as you can see in the map. One of the main characteristics of FAPES is capillarity. that one action can reach all the states, and the acknowledge of the regional difference in the activities. Our activities, we have joint activities with national partners that they are the federal fund agents, CAPI, CNPq, FINEP, and BRAPI. And we have also international partnerships, that is institution in Australia, Belgium, Colombia, European Union, Switzerland, United States, United Kingdom, among others. Please. Regarding the partnership between CONFAP and the Department of Education, the Memorandum of Understanding was signed December of 2020. It supports activities that encourage collaboration between Brazilians and Australian researchers. So joint research project, exchange of researchers and master PhD students, post-graduation and PhD students, seminars, workshop, and other activities that promote the results of joint activities and the development and coordination of joint activities, other joint activities. All the FAPs participate in this agreement. So it means that all the researchers in all the states can request the support. And the partnership has two axes. One is the Australia-Brazil Vital Research Collaboration, and the second one is the support of joint research project. About the first axis, the Australia-Brazil Vital Research Collaboration, it aims to foster new partnership and strengthen the ongoing ones to search innovative solutions for global problems. As mentioned, this one is the fourth edition. The first edition was in November 2001 about COVID-19. The second and third one, it was held in 2022, related to ocean and food security. We have institutional partners to organize the events. The first edition, we have the, sorry, Chad, they'll have the support of the Australian Academy of Science and the Brazilian Academy of Science, as we have in this edition. And the second and third one, we had the United Nations Development Program, the UNDP. Please, you can move. So, related to support of project, the main point is, first, the project has to be secured the research by the Australia side. So the project has to be funded in Australia first. After that, the Brazilian coordinator must send an email to CONFAP in order to verify the support from the FAP of his state. The FAP will decide if the budget that will be allocated to each project and their own criteria and steps for their decision. The coordination will be informed by all the requirements by CONFAP, and CONFAP will inform about the Department of Education about the result of the FAP's evaluation assessment. Thiago, please. Main reference about the support of projects are these two websites. One is the research funds recognized by the Department of Education, but the projects can also be funded by Australian universities. There is also in the CONFAP's website the link to access the orientation for Brazilians who request the support. And there is the email to any buyers. Next. Thank you. And that is my email, and Thiago, if you require more information, will be pleased to orientate to answer.
Great. Thank you so much, Flavia and Thiago, for your presentation. Hopefully that is informative, and please do reach out to CONFAP and the team here at the Australian Department of Education if you have any questions. We'll now move on to the final part of tonight's event, which is our keynote speakers, followed by a panel discussion. Please, if you have any questions during the talks, put them in the chat. We'll monitor the chat and help bring those up afterwards. Our first keynote speaker we've already heard from tonight, so Professor Virgilio Almeida from the Brazilian Academy of Sciences. Professor Virgilio is a professor of computer science at the Federal University of Minas Gerais and a faculty associate at the Berkman Klein Center at Harvard University. He's worked in universities and laboratories across Brazil and the United States and was previously the Brazilian National Secretary for Information Technology Policies. I'll now hand back over to you, Professor Virgilio.
Thank you, Cassia, for the introduction. And again, good evening and good morning to everyone that is attending this session. So I'm going to share my screen, just 1 minute, and we'll be there. One moment. How is that? It's working?
It is.
Yes, that works.
Okay. So when I was invited to give this talk about citizen science, I started wondering what should be the focus of the talk. And I think that there is an important research question that is to understand the impact of the online world, of the digital economy, as Professor Francis Separovic mentioned in her introduction. And I think that citizen science can help to answer some questions that societies around the world are asking about those platforms. So I'm going to try to explain why, give some ideas, and make some suggestions. So let's move ahead. So these pictures represent what the global platforms that a huge fraction of the global population interacts many times a day and depend on the services provided by those platforms to work, to connect to others, to entertain, to interact with government services. So we have Google, Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp, TikTok, Amazon, Netflix. And now we see, and maybe also this is something that is happening in Australia, is that governments are making available platforms for citizens to interact with those platforms. But when we look at this picture that I call the social technical systems, because it presents an interaction between humans and algorithms, there are 3 points that I want to mention that should be considered when we think of them. The first one is that they are run by algorithms, so there is no human intervention. The second one, that there are a lot of decisions made by the algorithms regarding to what we see, to what we read, to how we interact with specific services, and there is a lot of data collection. Everything that we do in the online space is recorded and used for some purpose in the future. So this is the basic picture of how the modern societies rely on digital services. But on the other side, although they are very convenient, they provide good services, they help the interaction among people, but there are a lot of problems that are caused by these platforms. And just to mention some of them, we have misinformation, fake news, conspiracy theory, hate speech, global information chaos, cyber attacks, coordinated foreign influence campaigns targeting elections of other countries. We also have concerns about the impact of automation, in particular in a country like Brazil, where there is a lot of inequality, social inequality. We also see that there is lack of rules and policies and a huge concentration of power in 5 or 6 big companies. And everything is done by algorithms. So they are, we can see those platforms, the services offered by these platforms are always driven by algorithms. So as these large platforms take on increasingly influential roles in our online social, economic and political interactions, there is a growing societal demand for transparency and accountability. That's the point of my talk. We need to understand, we need to work on the transparency of those big platforms. And we see that the consequences of those platforms, the way that they disseminate specific news, specific information, they can lead to problems all over the world, not only Brazil, but in many other countries of the world. In this specific case, it's Facebook services that were used to spread religious hatred in India and generate a lot of conflicts. The other thing that I want to mention is that we now have these new gatekeepers of knowledge, but they don't want us to see what they know. The traditional gatekeepers of knowledge, we all know that because we are academics working in universities. We had good librarians, we had journalists and government officials, but all those, let's say, old gatekeepers, they have largely been replaced by technological gatekeepers. In other words, algorithms that run search engines, AI chatbots, and social media feeds. And the point that I would like to call your attention is that whatever their flaws, the case of the old gatekeepers, were, at least on paper, they were beholden to the public. And the problem is that the new gatekeepers, the big companies, are fundamentally beholden only to profit and to their shareholders. So this is the big picture of this of the problems that we see in the online world. So I call your attention to something that is going to be even more important in the future. We need responsible science. We live in times of social technical systems that combine technical and social components, and where social actors and technological artifacts intertwine in complex ways. I'm talking about the relation between humans and algorithms. And so new roles for research in this computing age emerge in the context of responsible AI, responsible computing, that could greatly benefit from the areas of social science. So let's move. So this picture represents kind of work that I think that citizen science can do a lot of collaboration. What we see today, it's these big platforms called social technical systems, social media platforms, government platforms. They are, in terms of architecture, powerful, complex, and opaque, and that's an important point. There are opaque social technical systems that rely on algorithms and data. And this is because they are opaque. We, as a society, try to understand how did Twitter gave some priority to specific fake news, for instance, or why is YouTube presenting some videos that are against COVID? So just another hypothetical example. So in order to understand these big platforms, we have researchers, we have journalists, academics, policymakers, and we should have citizen scientists, because they can help, they can work together with all those actors to understand those platforms, to increase the transparency of the services provided in order to make them accountable. A recent article that was published by Science, they show that US, actually European Union regulation, US is working on that, but European Union legislation seek to open up digital platform data. So researchers, in the case of Europe, will be able to request data that represent the behavior of users, the services, to those platforms that will, by law, force it to provide. So digital platform companies have few legal obligations today to do so, and potentially stronger business incentives to not. So without legally binding mechanisms that provide greater clarity on what and how data can be shared with independent researchers in privacy-preserving ways, platforms are unlikely to share data for robust scientific inquiry and public oversight. So in our case in Brazil, Congress is also working on a platform on content moderation, and one of the articles of the new bill is to allow researchers to have access to this kind of data. And so the first point is that we need access to increase the transparency of those platforms. But we also need a multidisciplinary approach to citizen science. Citizen science evolved through multiple disciplinary knowledge into a field of study and participatory method of inquiry. In this case, in our case of the online world, citizen science is based on participatory principles, which not only position the public in a data collection role, but also encourage volunteers to join in the quest for solving scientific challenges. So citizen science involves more than just data collection. We need researchers in computer science, technology engineers, and algorithm developers to understand what is going on in those platforms based on data that could be collected. And we need social scientists to clarify, to elucidate the inherent risk, social risk associated with the advancement of algorithmization of our societies. So this picture is interesting because it shows how computer science and engineers and also technology can help in this task of understanding, of increasing the transparency of the global platform. We can have computing as a detector of social issues, computing as diagnostic, computing as rebuttal for what the platforms say that they do, and computing as a formalizer of services. So I'm going to give an example of this computing as detector of social issues. One of the problems that we have noticed all over the world in the last 4 or 5 years is the growing presence of extremists and hate speech, discrimination, things like that. And so we worked with some colleagues, and the research questions that we started working some of them were asked by journalists. So we can see the kind of collaboration that is possible. So this work was on auditing radicalization pathways on YouTube. It's a joint work with some young students and professors at EPFL, but also we benefited from the questions raised by journalists and the population. Why is that happening? So in order to do that, we were not able to get those data from the platform. So we collected them. The platform was open, so we collected 349 channels, 330,000 videos, and more than 72 million comments. So we try to analyze this radicalization in the US context. We started looking at communities that are in the middle, in the center of the political spectrum, and then they move to a more radical community, and then go to the extreme, what is called the alt-right. And our question was, how people arrive at this extremist community, and then we compare this with traditional media. So we got a lot of interesting results that showed that people started interacting here at this right-wing communities, but close to the center of the political spectrum. But then, as they interact with other members, they began to become more extremists, and they move to the far right in terms of political orientation. So this is a kind of example that helped us to understand, based on questions raised by citizens, to understand the behavior of extremists in the case of the YouTube. So just trying to get some lessons from that. Citizen science has primarily focused on the natural science. In our case, it's not that. But we are focusing on technology and social science. It is less common to find activities and projects in citizen science that follow social science and humanities topics and approaches, even though they may address, as I just presented, important and thought-provoking questions. A blend of social science, computer science, and citizen science, in particular journalists, is crucial for investigating and comprehending the behavior of modern, opaque digital platforms. And again, in order to empower citizen scientists, we need to make open source tools available to these citizen researchers in order to work with these very large amounts of data. And I think that research partnership between Brazil and Australia could benefit from different environments, but environments that use and that are part of these big global platforms. So that's basically what I wanted to bring for the discussion here. And thank you for your time. This is my email at the university, and Twitter and LinkedIn. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Professor Virgilio, for that very, very interesting presentation on something that I think is quite topical. I know being debated, some of these issues are being debated in Congress, how we deal with fake news and disinformation as well. So yeah. Thank you. I'd now like to present Mark Stickles, the Executive Director of the Pawsey Supercomputing Centre. Mark is a research executive with more than 20 years experience working at senior levels in innovative and business development roles. And during this time, he's led various initiatives in Australia's key energy, mining and agricultural sectors Just before I hand over to Mark, I noticed we've got some questions already in the chat. Please keep them coming in and I'll put them to the panel at the end. Thank you, Mark. Over to you.
Thank you. You might see that I've changed my jacket. I think I was causing some interference with the check jacket before. So
I can see you perfectly.
Okay, I'll just share my screen.
Great. We can see that.
Okay, everyone can see that.
Perfect.
So,
Full screen mode now.
Fantastic. Look, firstly, thank you for this opportunity to join this forum. And so I acknowledge the support of both of our governments and the welcomes and acknowledgements of the VIP speakers earlier today. I think I'm hoping to offer a different perspective on some of the important issues that Professor Virgilio just presented on. So hopefully our two presentations will stimulate some discussion and some questions, and they are in the interest of collaboration, I hope complementary, and offer some useful perspectives. So I will also, as is the practice here in Australia, acknowledge that I live and work on the traditional lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people here in Western Australia, and I acknowledge their ancestors and elders, past and present. I've learned a couple of words of their language, Nala Karich, Noongar Mort, Kayan Karak, Nijabuja. So I'm acknowledging their ongoing custody and care of this wonderful country. I'll speak on behalf of PAWSI. PAWSI is in itself a collaboration. We're a joint venture of Australian universities, the National Science Agency, with tremendous support from the Australian government through a major research infrastructure program, and also the West Australian government. So we're a significant collaboration in our own right. I thought it might be useful just to set the scene and point out where we are. I think I did Google that we're about 14,500 kilometres away from the embassy in Brasilia, and I think I've got a colleague or two from Perth on the line as well. So I'll give a little shout out to anyone who is in one of those suburbs that you might see flying by you on this Google Maps flyover. But it is an illustration of where we exist in the southwest corner of Western Australia. We do focus a lot to our north and position ourselves as a facility that sits within the same time zone as about a third of the world's population. But increasingly, as I think you'll see through the course of this presentation, the connections that bind us and that we can build together are working beyond borders, and that's enabled by the digital technologies and infrastructure that underpins much of what was in the previous keynote speaker's presentation. We do operate a national facility, and most recently we've installed some of the most powerful and energy efficient research supercomputing infrastructure in the Southern Hemisphere, and among some of the most efficient in the world. In reflecting the power of collaborations and partnerships, I illustrate here some of the national and international partnerships that we operate as a high performance computing facility, and that's just an illustration of some of them. There are many forms of international collaborations that between the facilities that provide the enabling computing infrastructure and data services that support science at all levels, from national scientific instrumentation facilities through to citizen science. What I would like to reflect is in my opening, I do want to say that this might not be as familiar to many of you about the role that the high performance computing facilities play in supporting science and research, but I reflect that the recent our experience through the pandemic, I've made this comment a couple of times in various forums, that we wouldn't have as difficult and as tragic in many cases and in many countries as the pandemic was, the COVID pandemic, the accelerated development of vaccines and the understanding and the modeling of the epidemiology, the spread of the virus, would not have been as rapid as it was achieved without the combined effort of national supercomputing facilities around the world. It took just 200 days to develop a vaccine. It wouldn't have been possible using conventional, if you like, lab-based science. It needed the power of supercomputing infrastructure to support that. High performance computing also underpins our climate science modeling and our understanding of our changing climate. It's also, I'll contend, essential for understanding our transition to a more renewable energy, sustainable environment. And I think as national facilities and as collaborative facilities, we can be the engines to accelerate scientific discovery. However, underpinning a lot of this is a challenge that we are also incredibly energy intensive and can be contributing to some of the problems that we're experiencing with respect to energy and infrastructure. So I've contended that we're at something of a tipping point. The ethical questions that I think were raised so powerfully in the previous speaker's point, but the infrastructure and the kind of enterprise level issues that we're dealing with all need to be addressed. And I think that's a role where I think citizen scientists can have a powerful voice. Some other points to make before I show you, I'm going to show you my next little video is actually a time lapse of the deconstruction and construction of our newest supercomputer. It's been a 3 or 4 year project, but you'll see it in just a 1 minute time lapse. Before I show you that, I will reflect that why this is important from an energy point of view, that about 8% of the world's electricity is used to develop the support information technology around the world. This is some ARC research data out of a group called the Centre of Excellence in Future Low Energy Electronics Technology out of UNSW. But that figure is doubling every 10 years. And if we continue on this trajectory, by the middle of this century, arguably we could use almost all the energy on the planet to power these high performance supercomputers or hyperscalers, the large computer and data farms that are around the world by the middle of this century. So there's a fundamental challenge here underpinning the energy and infrastructure. So I just move to my next video. So what this hopefully is streaming through to you is the first system that we had at Pawsey. It's called Magnus. And this system served Australian science for almost 8 years, several years. It's a petascale system. What you're seeing behind the scenes of a supercomputer is this network of cabling that actually interconnects densely packed arrays of computer architecture. And what essentially makes a supercomputer super is that it's massively parallel. You can distribute your problem, your data analysis, your visualization, your scientific problem over hundreds of thousands of computer processes, and then generate in a time span that would be days or weeks that would take a desktop computer years or would be impossible to do on a normal computer. The new system, so that first system that was taken away was a 1 petaflop system. So it was at its time in the top 30 or so computers in the world. It's been replaced by a new system that is 30 to 40 times more powerful, and it is taking effectively the same footprint. So what you're seeing there in that video was Moore's law in action. So they talk about Moore's law and the doubling of compute power every year. We saw in that time lapse a 30 to 40 times increase in the compute capacity of our supercomputer in the space of a number of years, and taking essentially the same footprint. Importantly, we saw also a massive improvement. We have seen a massive improvement in energy efficiency. But at the heart of it all are CPUs and GPUs and billions of transistors that operate to generate the computing calculations that we run our science on. There's estimated, I think, to be, one of my quotes is about 1 trillion transistors, so circuits, little circuits for every person on the planet. And so if you think of that as requiring electricity, you realize the scale of the challenge we have with the compute demands and energy demands of these large scale systems. And some of the most significant computer providers are, as you'd expect from the professor's presentation previously, those Googles and Facebooks and others who are providing the data fabric for all of our social media and other data environments. So there's some data there about the scale of the system, about the generation of architecture that we're using. It is in itself described as an exascale class architecture. So it's the same type of architecture that exists in some of the national laboratories in the United States and in the European consortium that are building some of the world's largest computing systems. We're not in the same category. This was a $70 million project. The European project is, I think, about 500 million euros. The American laboratory projects approach $1 billion. So the order of magnitude is quite significant, but the same architecture, the same, if you like, scientific capacity is enabled by this sort of infrastructure. What we do here at Pawsey, to give you a little bit of a framework for the type of activity we support, we have an integrated environment as a national facility based here in Western Australia supporting high-performance computing for the nation. So over 30 universities use our computing resources. We have a cloud environment. So essentially a cloud is I should say, I'm not a technically qualified computer science, so I'll talk in generalist terms, but I've managed and led Pawsey over the last 5 years. I've got a great technical team, but a cloud, people ask what the cloud is. A cloud is still high performance computing that sits on our premises. The cloud describes the way you access that infrastructure. Our supercomputer sits in a similar room, and there's a different way of accessing that. It's more, you think of it as like an advanced scientific instrument, and we schedule time for researchers around the country to run their simulations and to run their predictive research, predictive science on this system. We also have significant infrastructure here supporting one of those important domains for Australian science around radio astronomy. So we operate the computing and data requirements for radio astronomy telescopes here in the Midwest of Western Australia, some several hundred kilometres from Pawsey. So in the top right of this screen, you'll see there's two types of infrastructure, and they both operate as precursor projects to the Square Kilometre Array, which is one of those global super science initiatives that brings together, I think at the moment, about 16 countries, and they're building 2 telescope arrays, one in South Africa and one in Western Australia. And we've got some unique geography and some radio quiet environments that is enabling some of this world-class research infrastructure to be constructed over the next 4 or 5 years, commenced construction in late last year. But over the last 6 or 7 years, we've been running the science for precursor projects for radio astronomy. And I noted in the introductory presentation, that's one of the larger domains of collaboration between Brazil and Australia with respect to advanced physics. This physics and astronomy are compute intensive science, but also incredibly powerful international networks of collaborators, and Australia plays an important part in that international community. This next, as I speak to energy and infrastructure and the challenges that we have here, I have another short video just to illustrate that behind the white space of our systems and the high tech of the infrastructure, there's also significant engineering that provides power and cooling to support the operations of our facility. So we run, it's probably a couple of megawatts of power this year to run our system. But we also require several million litres of water to cool the systems. The supercomputers generate significant heat. And in our environment, we run a closed loop cooling system. So we take water out of the aquifer beneath us, we cycle it through Pawsey's computing system. So you can see the blue and the red cables there. Literally, they are water-filled computing units. Water goes in at 21 degrees, it gets heated through the performance of the systems, and then captured and then re-injected into our aquifer beneath us. And that closed loop sustains several million litres of water a year, which is quite a precious resource here for us in Western Australia. So both our efforts to have some renewable energy with respect to solar on our rooftop, and also using water efficiently are two elements of a number of approaches to sustain the energy infrastructure and reduce the footprint of our facility. So we have a specially designed building. We've explored projects to look at the provision of hydrogen fuels. We've done extensive studies on our impact on the aquifer that we draw and recycle water through. We've run the cooling project here at Pawsey for over a decade, and that's been successfully extended into our new infrastructure. And we've also undertaken some advanced studies into electronic interference into our facility and vibration, because we're also doing some novel work with respect to quantum computing. So the next generation of computing here, we're developing projects to support that activity. So I mentioned the square kilometre array. What I'm showing you here is a merging of two site photographs. So one on the left is in South Africa, and the one on the right is the telescope array in Western Australia in the Murchison. And I should practice the traditional name in Ilnyarmani Ilgari Bundara, which in the Wajiri Yamaji means to share the land and the sky. And it is an illustration of the important relationship with the traditional owners of the land. It's a very special part of Western Australia. And over the next 5 years, 131,000 antennae are going to be built over a significant footprint. I think it's about a 60-kilometre sort of baseline. And it will generate several hundred petabytes of data per annum that needs to be managed here through advanced supercomputing and data environments at Pawsey. Similarly, in South Africa, there's a similar project. And then that network of infrastructure and open access astronomy data is provided to the world. It's one of the foundation science efforts here in Australia that provides us with the infrastructure and expertise to support data science at scale, and helps underpin an increased number of research domains that are, that are turning to computational methods to support their science. Arguably, science has gone from being, in many domains, experimental leading to generating data, to now having masses of data available in which you then generate your science. So the tools are almost inverting science from the classical methods of generations past. We're now overloaded with data and turning science in some respects on its head. What I will sort of lead to, I'm really poor at checking time, so I don't know how I'm going for my 20 minutes, but I've got a couple of case studies, because what I want to speak to is just the type of science we support, and hopefully encourage some conversations around this. We are an open science facility. We have some of the largest data holdings in the country. We work with our Australian Research Data Commons, so we have a national agency to help better organise the policies, the training, the infrastructures at local and national scale that host data. And so I acknowledge the ARDC. I think they might have also volunteered me to contribute to your forum. So I thank them for the opportunity as well. But this first story, and I've got a couple of quick case studies to show you. This is one of the first science outputs from for the new supercomputer late last year. And it's an image of a remnant supernova. So the telescopes that are in the Midwest have been able to survey the sky, and they were able to produce this within the first day or two of the operations of the antenna. it is, just as something lighthearted, it is, we did produce this story a week or two after a French physicist put a picture of salami on the internet saying it was of the sun, and then just made a lighthearted reference. So we got a lot of people thinking this was a piece of chorizo or something like salami, but it is genuinely the image of a supernova collapsing. So we have the compute and data capacity to support this sort of science, but bringing it from the levels of astronomy down to a human scale. The world of AI now and the application of data that's collected in clinical environments paired with advanced data science and high performance computing is generating significant opportunities for better predictive and better intervention in medical environments. So one of our supercomputing projects with a local hospital and now a network of hospitals is taking information from research, information from monitoring traumatically brain injured patients. So a patient that's been injured in a car accident and is having a traumatic brain injury, that they've developed special algorithms to be able to monitor and then predict when there's going to be a swelling in the patient's brain and then predict potentially a fatal outcome. So by providing a 20 to 30 minute window, they're able to intervene and effectively save lives. This project wouldn't have been possible without innovative data science, advanced supercomputing, and an very positive interaction with clinical researchers. It's also a project that's being applied to a number of hospitals around Australia and has the potential for wider application. There is a YouTube video there, but I won't play that because it's we're running out of time, I think. The second, another positive story about why the power that we have in supercomputing is important and useful for research and science is the ability to develop visualizations. So the massive data that our researchers work with, if we're able to develop visualizations to then illustrate, in this case, the role of a treatment for cancer and how that cancer treatment's going to attack cancer cells, is really helpful for clinical instruction and for patient care. So there's some amazing, the massive compute power with massive data sets can develop some really important and powerful visualizations. And this is something that I'm not sure, I'll test this little video and just give you a sample of it to see it moving. No. The other thing with embedded YouTube videos and this level of security is I don't know that I've set my security up to allow it to do that. So the other video was of my own, so I'll leave that one alone. And then my last, second last little showcase to show you is the importance of high performance computing and massive data sets to help us understand our changing climate. So in the center of that picture is a picture of the southwest of Western Australia. And I'm trying to think if it may be about 20% of the size of Brazil. That I'm trying to think of the initial picture of our countries have a complementary scale. So it's quite a significant region. West Australia occupies about 1/3 of the landmass, only about 1/10 of the population, but we have significant landmass. But as you can see on the left-hand side is the current climate models operate on about a 250 square kilometre grid. So understanding and interpreting what's happening to our climate on the basis of that left-hand model is a little difficult. With a new model and the application of, I think, about 40 million hours of compute time that we'll give to this project, we're able to develop over the next year or two a finer model. And this is replicated on a global scale. So this is why supercomputing and massive data to help understand our changing climate literally develops better maps and better tools for decision-making and response and predicting flood events or fire, because we've developed a much better understanding of the scale, a much better understanding at a better scale. On the right-hand side of that picture is a picture of a compute blade. So when I showed you the back of a supercomputer, if you like, that's in the heart of a supercomputer where the various GPUs and CPUs are networked together and they sit in blades. That's that picture. And then my last roadmap, there's a lot of detail here, but what I just thought I'd share with you is that we've been working with Australian researchers in taking quantum technologies out of the physics lab and putting them into a supercomputing centre. And that's been a project that we've been working on for the last 3 years. And it is, in our world, it is almost, it feels like science fiction when they talk about quantum computing. But the physicists and the experimental computing folk are really generating the next generation of computing architecture, and its ability, its mathematical ability, is essentially, you know, exponentially more powerful than that of classical computing. And we've optimized and improved the performance of classical computing to the level that it is now. So if you look at the development of AI and the generative AI projects that we're seeing launched in the last 12 months, behind that is this amazing compute power that's been able to train the models and develop those and deploy those tools. Quantum computing operates at a different type of, you know, physical basis, and the mathematical power of that quantum circuit, if they can get it stable and accurate and scaled, offers a whole nother level of computing power and the ability to tackle scientific problems that we've been unable to do using even the most advanced computers. We've been on a journey on that process here in Australia, and we're part of a national effort to support the integration of emerging quantum computing with classical computing. And that's an interesting question as well for what it might mean for the data and citizen scientists when the tools are even more powerful than what they are now. I think that's the end. Again, I'm poor at tracking my time. Hopefully that's gone to reasonable time. I didn't get away from someone saying stop. Thank you very much for the opportunity to join this conversation. It's been a privilege, and I look forward to your questions.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Mark, for that really, really fascinating presentation. I personally learned a lot about supercomputing and the application, so that's great. We've got a couple of questions already in the chat, so please keep them coming in. The first question is to Professor Virgilio, but of course, Mark, if you have something to add, please jump in. And I might combine them because they're quite similar. So from Damiano Spina and Libby Young, around the idea of citizen science getting involved beyond data collection. And do you have ideas on how to encourage citizens to become actively engaged scientists? And what are your thoughts on citizens becoming engaged social scientists?
Well, thank you, Cassia. Well, that's an interesting question. Thank you both for this question. How to engage citizens in this social, to become a social scientist? Well, it seems to me that this is an interesting question, because what we see today in most countries around the world is that we need evidence to make some claims, to advocate for some specific questions in government. So I think that if we let's take an example. You have an NGO, a non-governmental organization, that's trying to work on the consequences of the economy or the consequences of some public policies on specific vulnerable groups. Those vulnerable groups can use data from those platforms to advocate their questions, to advocate for support, to make claims. So I think that vulnerable groups can use data that is collected by the platforms to make their cases, and that would be a very strong motivation to have this kind of citizen science for using knowledge from social science. So that would be feasible. I think that we see vulnerable groups that are being such as Black Lives Matter or Me Too. All of them need evidence to support their to make a case. So that's a motivation for those people working as citizen scientists.
You're on
You are
mute.
mute.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. I was just saying, building on that and drawing you into the conversation as well, Mark, I was wondering about equity and equality of access to not only data, but also the facilities like the supercomputing centers to process that data, and, really keen for your observations on that.
Yeah, so thank you. There are, in a couple of domains, there are increasing calls for community-based scientists, citizen scientists, to help with data collection, and particularly in environmental science. And I know astronomy community has an active sort of citizen element, but there are increasingly development of platforms to provide observations of people out in the field, out in the environment, to then help identify new species or environmental observations, and then feeding that into a science organization or agency. So in our environment, providing a platform or a backbone for that to happen is something that we would do as a national facility. But it's important.
Great. Sorry, Mark.
But I think it's important. There's an important role for in our environment in Australia for the ARDC to help to set standards and help to set so data without a framework for organising and understanding its application can be meaningless. So I think one of the challenges here is to establish the framework and the processes so that when we collect that data, we can understand its reproducibility and how it can be interpreted. And that's one of the challenges we offer. As a national facility, through our universities, we have a portion of our resources which can be applied for kind of on demand. The majority of our infrastructure, though, is available for almost on an annual cycle of application, like a large instrument or a large I'm trying to think of like a synchrotron, or for some science organizations have a specialist need. So not everyone can use it, because not all problems can be run on a supercomputer.
Fantastic. Did you have any comments, Professor Virgilio, on the equity and access to data?
Well, I congratulate Mark for his presentation. It's quite interesting, and I think that if we have in mind that AI applications can also be very common in the future and also be important for some groups, I think that as Mark said, not only data, but if we have data and AI resources on a supercomputing center like his center, and those centers provide access to those specific groups of activists or groups that represent vulnerable people, that would be quite interesting. And so we can match computer power, data, and some specific questions that could be answered by AI to help people that feel discomfortable or feel uneasy with some policies or government decisions. So that would be an interesting thing to combine: computer power for AI plus data.
Great, thank you. We've got a comment from Alison Spetch in the chat just around the importance of citizen science being validators for algorithms developed with particular benefits in scale and time, and also noting that several of the biodiversity and environmentally based NCRIS facilities in Australia are already using citizen scientists as data collectors. If there's any other questions, please feel free to raise your hand as well if you want to join in the debate. Another question I had, noting we've still got a couple of minutes left, is around regulation and the difficulty around regulating social media, access to data by governments, and really what some of the challenges are with that regulation, but also, I guess, what's some of the downsides as well in terms of access.
Well, regarding regulation, I think that almost every country in the world is fighting to find out ways of regulating social media. But if we one of the things that society wants from those big platforms is that they show some transparency in their services, in order, as I said, in order to have accountability. So I think that social groups are important in demanding transparency. In order to do that, if they have access, they can show what are problems that they noted analyzing the data. So I think that data and access, especially to process those large amount of data, are important to contribute to the discussions of content moderation and regulation of the platform. And AI will make this issue of regulation and content moderation even more complicated, much more, because we will see a growing, the growing number of, or the growing amount of disinformation, very good texts and images for disinformation circulating globally, and there will be a problem to validate, to verify if those things are authentic or not. So I think that there are many problems that can be tackled with the help of citizen scientists. I think that that's important. It's not only government or not only science that will work on those things. The society, through these citizen scientists, could help a lot.
Great, thank you. And I noticed, Mark, you've put a comment around Australia's National AI Centre focusing on responsible AI regulation.
Yes, it is a priority, and they're pulling together consortia of governments, state governments and industry to address putting out frameworks. But it is something that's I think most governments around the world the technology is moving ahead of our ability to manage and regulate, and so the role of how we respond to this, I think, is evolving almost daily.
Great. I might just take, noting it's just on 8:30. If you've got time for just one last question. Yes, and then I'll wrap up. So from Alison Spetch, the empowerment of citizens is vital, but in accessing data, the level of data protection and delivery and whether there should be training involved has to be decided. Should there be a citizen science program to ready people for contributing effectively and well?
Could you repeat a little bit the question?
Yes.
So
should there be a citizen science program to ready people for contributing effectively and well?
Okay. Yeah, I think so. I think that universities can help creating those citizen scientist program, because we can benefit from knowledge from society, from indigenous people. There's a lot of knowledge. So looking into the future, we should be able to put together traditional scientific knowledge and knowledge that comes from the different groups of society in order to discuss these big problems that bring uncertainty to most of the countries today regarding environment, regarding equality, regarding the information dissemination. So yes, it should be a good initiative to create a group of citizen scientists.
Okay. Thank you so much. Any final comments from you, Professor Virgilio or Mark, before we wrap up?
Well, first, let me thank you all for your time and for your questions. And I found some interesting comments here. And I think that based on what Mark presented and the points that I raised here, a collaboration between Brazil and Australia would be very good. We have some common interests, but also common problems regarding environment, regarding indigenous groups, so that we can benefit from a collaboration between the two countries. Thank you all for inviting me to this session.
Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. My very brief comment I put into the chat, it echo the professor's sentiment, but the role of training and education is more important than ever, I think, as AI technology is not infallible. It is able to be manipulated. It's in the hands of industry, not in the hands of the traditional custodians, as I think the professor's one of his opening slides commented on. So I think the role of working with and training and educating citizen scientists would be very, very important. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you for everyone participating tonight, in particular, Mark and Professor Virgilio. That was a really interesting debate. And please, if you want, feel free to come back tomorrow night for our second session, but also understand that you're very busy. So our second session is tomorrow night/morning, same time. The link is in the booklet. We'll basically move straight into moderated breakout rooms as soon as we start. We've got Professor Kimberly Weatherall, Professor Pablo Moscato, and Professor Lissandro Granville moderating those rooms. And hopefully we can continue some of the ideas and debate that we've heard tonight, and also bring some stuff a bit more specific to the areas that you're interested in. So thank you again very much, and we'll see you all tomorrow night.